I need to tell you about the most elaborate deception I've ever experienced, about how someone can create an entirely false reality and make you believe it completely, about how far people will go to hide their betrayal. But first, I need to tell you who I thought my husband was so you can understand how completely he fooled me. My name is Rebecca, and I'm 31 years old. I was married to a man named Derek for 5 years. I met him when I was 24. He told me he was in the Army, stationed at a base about an hour from where I lived. He was in uniform when we met at a coffee shop near the base. He looked handsome and confident, and when he struck up a conversation with me, I was immediately attracted to him. We dated for about a year before he proposed. During that time, he'd show me his military ID, talk about his unit, his deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. He had all the lingo down, knew the ranks and structure, had photos in uniform with other soldiers. I had no reason to doubt any of it. My family had no military background, so I didn't know enough to question the details. When he proposed, he did it in his dress uniform. It was romantic and patriotic, and I said yes immediately. We got married in a small ceremony. Some of his military buddies came, or at least guys in uniform who he said were his buddies. My family and friends were there. It felt real and legitimate. The first few years of marriage were good. Derek would go to the base during the day for work. He'd come home in his combat uniform sometimes, other times in regular clothes. He'd talk about training exercises and boring paperwork and difficult commanders. It all sounded believable because I had nothing to compare it to. He'd get what he called deployment orders a few times a year, short ones, 2 or 3 weeks. He'd leave with his gear. I'd get occasional calls or emails, and then he'd come back with stories about where he'd been and what he'd done. I'd welcome him home, grateful he was safe, proud of his service. About a year ago, Derek came home and told me he was getting deployed for 6 months. A longer deployment than usual, he said, but it was important, and he had to go. He showed me official-looking papers with Army letterhead and signatures, deployment orders to an undisclosed location in the Middle East. He couldn't tell me exactly where for security reasons. I was devastated, but tried to be supportive. 6 months felt like forever, but military spouses deal with this all the time. I could handle it. We'd video chat when possible, email, get through it together. Derek spent the next month preparing. He'd go to the base for briefings and medical checkups. He'd come home and pack his deployment bags. We'd have emotional conversations about missing each other and staying strong. He'd hold me and promise everything would be okay. The day he left was one of the hardest days of my life. I drove him to what he said was a military transport departure point at a small airport. He was in his combat uniform with all his gear. We stood there hugging and crying. He told me he loved me and would contact me as soon as he could. Then he walked through the doors with other people in uniform, and I watched him disappear. I drove home alone and cried for hours. My husband was deployed. He'd be gone for 6 months in a dangerous place, and I wouldn't know if he was safe. The first few weeks were hard. He'd email me every few days, short messages saying he was okay but couldn't talk much. The internet was limited where he was, he said. Phone calls were rare, and when they happened, the connection was terrible and cut out frequently. But hearing his voice, even for 2 minutes, made me feel connected to him. I joined online support groups for military spouses, read articles about coping with deployment, sent care packages to the mailing address he'd given me, wrote him letters every week telling him about my days and how much I missed him. I was doing everything right, being the strong spouse he needed. I'd post updates on social media about missing my deployed husband. Friends and family would comment with support and prayers for his safe return. I wore his dog tags around my neck, put a blue star in our window to show a family member was deployed. I was proud of him, even though I missed him terribly. About 3 months into the deployment, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered and heard a man's voice I didn't know. Hi, is this Rebecca? I'm calling about Derek. He's 3 months behind on rent, and I need to know when he's planning to pay. I was confused. Rent? What are you talking about? The apartment. He rented it 6 months ago. Said he worked in the area and needed a place. But he hasn't paid rent in 3 months, and I can't reach him. I think you're the wrong person. My husband Derek is deployed overseas. He doesn't have an apartment. The man gave me an address. Said Derek had signed a lease, moved in, had been living there until about 3 months ago when he stopped paying and stopped responding to messages. That doesn't make sense. He's been deployed for 3 months. He's not in the country. Lady, I don't know what to tell you. I have a signed lease with his name and signature. High lived Airy. His stuff is still here. I need to reach him about the rent, or I'm going to have to take legal action. I got the address from him and told him I'd look into it. Then I sat there trying to make sense of what he'd said. An apartment. Derek had rented an apartment 6 months ago and lived there until exactly when his deployment started. I called Derek's military contact number, the one he'd given me for emergencies. It went to a voicemail with a generic message. I left a message asking him to call me immediately. Then I looked up the address the landlord had given me. It was in a city about 3 hours away, not near any military base. Just a regular city with no military presence at all. I didn't understand why would Derek have an apartment 3 hours away. The only explanation that made sense was that he'd been stationed somewhere new and hadn't told me. But that didn't make sense either. We lived together. He came home every night, or at least I thought he did. I started going through our finances more carefully. We had separate accounts, but I had access to our joint account. I saw payments to the landlord going back 6 months, rent payments for an apartment I knew nothing about. I also saw other charges, restaurants in that city, gas stations, grocery stores, all from the past 6 months, all in a city 3 hours away. My hands were shaking. Something was very wrong. I tried calling Derek again. No answer. I sent emails, nothing. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Then I got in my car and drove 3 hours to the address the landlord had given me. I had to see for myself. I had to understand what was happening. The apartment was in a regular complex. Nothing military about it. I found the unit number and knocked. No answer. I called the landlord and told him I was Derek's wife and needed to see the apartment. He met me there within an hour. He unlocked the door and we walked in. It was a furnished one-bedroom apartment, and it was clearly lived in. Men's clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom, food in the kitchen. I recognized some of Derek's things, his favorite coffee mug, a jacket I'd bought him, but there were also things I didn't recognize. Women's clothes in the closet, makeup in the bathroom, photos on the wall. Photos of Derek with a woman I'd never seen before. They were clearly a couple. His arm around her, both of them smiling. A photo that looked like it was from a dinner date. Another that looked like a hiking trip. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Who is this woman? The landlord looked uncomfortable. I assumed that was his girlfriend or wife. They've been here together for months. I've seen them coming and going, but he's married to me, and he's supposed to be deployed. I took photos of everything with my phone. The apartment, the clothes, the pictures on the wall. Evidence that Derek had been living here with another woman while telling me he was deployed overseas. I found paperwork in a drawer. Bills with this address. A lease agreement with Derek's signature. And something else. A pay stub from a construction company in this city, dated from 2 months ago. Derek wasn't deployed. He'd been working construction in this city for at least the past 6 months. I sat down on the couch, surrounded by evidence of my husband's double life, and I started to cry. The landlord excused himself awkwardly. I just sat there trying to process what I was seeing. My husband wasn't in the military, or if he was, he wasn't deployed. He'd been living here with another woman while telling me he was overseas serving his country. I pulled myself together enough to look around more. I found more photos. Derek and this woman at restaurants, at parks, at what looked like family gatherings with people I didn't recognize. They looked happy together, like a real couple. I found women's clothing in sizes that weren't mine, jewelry, personal items that clearly belonged to someone who lived here regularly. And then I found something in the bedroom drawer that made everything worse. Fake military documents, orders for deployment that looked official but had small inconsistencies. A military ID that looked real but when I examined it closely, seemed off. Uniform patches and insignia that didn't quite match what I'd seen on real soldiers. Derek had been creating fake military documentation, forging deployment orders, faking his entire military career possibly. I called the army base he claimed to work at, asked to speak to someone who could verify if Derek worked there. They had no record of anyone by his name. They said if I thought someone was impersonating military personnel, I should report it to the proper authorities. I sat in that apartment for hours, going through everything, taking photos, trying to understand the scope of his deception. He'd been living 2 lives. One with me, where he was a deployed soldier. Another here where he was a construction worker with a girlfriend. Finally, I heard a key in the lock. The door opened. And there was Derek in regular clothes, carrying groceries. He froze when he saw me. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" I held up one of the photos. "Who is she?" He put down the groceries slowly. "I can explain." "You can explain? You're supposed to be deployed. You're supposed to be overseas. Instead, you've been living here with another woman for 6 months. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You faked a deployment so you could live with your girlfriend. How long has this been going on?" Derek sat down, defeated. About a year, I met her at a job site. We started seeing each other. It got serious. I didn't know how to tell you. So you faked military deployment orders? You've been pretending to be deployed while actually living with her. I didn't plan it this way. It just happened. And once I started lying, I couldn't stop. Are you even in the military? Is any of it real? He looked at the floor. No, I was never in the army. I bought the uniforms online, made fake IDs and documents. I've been working construction since before we met. Everything about the military was a lie. I felt sick. Everything, the deployments, the base, all the stories, all of it. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. We've been married for 5 years. 5 years built on complete lies. I know. Who is she? The woman in the photos. Her name is Amanda. She thinks I work construction and travel for work sometimes. She doesn't know about you. She doesn't know you're married. No. I told her I was single. So you've been married to me while living with her and telling her you're single and faking military service to both of us. Derek just nodded. He looked miserable, but I didn't feel sorry for him at all. The door opened again and a woman walked in. She looked at me. Then Archie Derek confused. Derek, who is this? Derek stood up. Amanda, this is Rebecca, my wife. I watched Amanda's face go through the same shock I'd felt. You're what? I'm his wife. We've been married for 5 years. He told me he was deployed overseas for the past 6 months. Apparently he's been living here with you instead. Amanda looked at Derek with betrayal in her eyes. You're married. You told me you were single. You said you traveled for work. You've been lying to me this whole time. Derek tried to speak, but Amanda cut him off. She started crying, yelling at him. I almost felt sorry for her. She'd been lied to just like I had. I left them arguing in the apartment and went back to my car. I drove home in a daze. When I got there, I went through everything Derek had ever told me about the military. Looked at photos, documents, everything. It was all fake. Uniforms you could buy online. IDs that were forged. Documents that looked official but weren't. He'd been playing dress, creating an elaborate fantasy to hide the fact that he was just a construction worker who was cheating on his wife. I filed for divorce the next day. I also reported him for stolen valor, impersonating military personnel. That's a federal crime. The investigators were very interested in the fake documents and uniforms. Derek tried to call me dozens of times, left voicemails begging me to listen, to understand. I blocked him on everything. Through the legal process, more details came out. He'd been seeing Amanda for 18 months, not just a year. The apartment had been his base for his double life. He'd cycled between our house and hers, telling me he was at work or on base, telling her he was traveling for a construction job. The fake deployment was his way of spending 6 months exclusively with Amanda without me getting suspicious about his absences. He'd planned to come back to me after 6 months, probably with some story about how deployment changed him or made him realize what he wanted. But the landlord's call about unpaid rent had ruined his plan. Apparently Derek had run out of money trying to maintain 2 households and had stopped paying rent on Amanda's apartment 3 months into his fake deployment. Amanda testified in my divorce proceedings. She was furious at Derek for lying to her too. Between the two of us, we had enough evidence to prove extensive fraud and deception. I got everything in the divorce, the house, savings, everything. Derek got debt and legal troubles. The stolen valor case is still ongoing. Impersonating military personnel carries serious penalties. He could face fines and jail time. I had to tell my family and friends the truth, that my military husband was never actually military, that every deployment, every story, every moment of pride I'd felt was based on lies. It was humiliating. Some people asked how I didn't question it more. But when someone shows you uniforms and IDs and documents, when they speak the language and know the details, why would you doubt them? Especially someone you love and trust. I joined a support group for people who'd been catfished or deceived in long-term relationships. Hearing other stories helped. Understanding I wasn't the only person who'd been elaborately lied to for years. It's been 7 months since I found that apartment. 7 months since my entire life was revealed to be a fiction. I'm still processing it. Still trying to figure out what was real and what was performance. Did Derek ever love me? Or was I just convenient? Was I the respectable wife he could show to his family while Amanda was his real relationship? Or was Amanda the side piece, and I was supposed to be his real life? I'll never know. And that's the hardest part. Not knowing what was true. Not knowing if any moment we shared was genuine, or if he was always pretending. I'm not dating yet. How can I trust anyone after this? If someone can fake an entire military career for 5 years, what else are people capable of hiding? But I'm working on it. Therapy helps. So, those is time. So does knowing that I'm not alone in having been deceived this way. I still see military families sometimes, and I feel this complicated mix of emotions. Respect for real service members, anger at Derek for disrespecting their sacrifice, embarrassment that I fell for his fake version of it. I took down all the photos of him in uniform, threw away the blue star from my window, returned the dog tags he'd given me that were probably ordered from some website, erased every trace of the lie from my home. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if the landlord had never called. Would Derek have kept up the fake deployments for all 6 months? Come back with stories about overseas? Continued the double life indefinitely? Probably. He'd already kept it up for 5 years. Why not longer? I also wonder about Amanda. Did she stay with him? Or did she leave when she found out about me? I'll never know. I cut off all contact with anything related to Derek. The hardest part is explaining to new people I meet. When they ask about my ex-husband, what do I say? That he faked military service to hide a double life. It sounds insane, like something from a movie, but it's my actual life. So I want to ask you something. If you discovered your partner had faked an entire career and deployment to hide a double life, could you ever trust anyone again? How would you move forward? And what would you do if you found out someone was impersonating military service? Because I'm still trying to figure out how to process all of this. If you discovered your spouse had faked military deployment to live with someone else and had been impersonating military service for years, how would you handle it? Would you report them or just walk away? And could you ever trust anyone again after discovering lies on this scale? I really want to hear your thoughts because I'm still processing how someone could create such an elaborate deception.